Welcome back to KeZaka Stokvel Insights. Before the break, we looked at Bambanani Block Club, a group of neighbours turned support network committed to easing funeral costs and emotional stress through unity and hands-on help. But their journey doesn't end there. They're now looking to evolve into business ventures that provides funeral equipment rentals to their wider community. Joining me now to break this down is our expert guest from Thai Vision Media, Thabiso Masurubele. Thabiso, thank you very much for joining us once more.
Thank you for having me, Nonto.
I think what's really interesting about this group is that they were once 60 and now they are down to 35. It seems like an easy change throughout the years. But is it incorrect for me to assume that they shouldn't be having financial struggles since they're still 35 members?
No, I think there are two sides to that story. It's always good. The higher the number of members you have, the higher the income that you have, because you've got more contributions coming through. So you do have a lot more money coming through. But with the increased number of members that you have, so does the admin increase and the claims and the challenges. So a lot of groups often come to us and we help them grow the numbers. But we say in growing your numbers, also be aware of the challenges that also have come with the issue of growing your numbers. So your admin processes, for instance, have to improve. The way you process certain things like your claims. So the higher the number of people you have, it's also possible that the higher the number of claims that you have. So it's not always a given that the more people you have, the greater your financial situation will be. It always depends on how you manage those situations when it comes to your finances, what your objectives are. And also remember, it's easier to manage different minds if you've got 10 minds. Imagine if you're managing now 100 different ideas and people who, they woke up differently, they've got their own ideas on how to achieve that particular objective. So it becomes a lot more challenging to manage a greater number of people. Because remember, you form the Stokvel with a common goal. So your common goal would be to acquire assets. But then how do you achieve that common goal? And you'll have 100 different opinions on what's the best route to achieve that. So that gives you a problem. If you've got 10 people, you reach consensus relatively easier than reaching consensus with 100 people. So, yeah.
Now, I find it very interesting in terms of the title of the Stokvel Group or Burial Society. It's Bambanani Block Club.
Yeah.
It means there's a limit in terms of territory here. So how are they able to expand and be able to rent their equipment to blocks aside from their own?
I think with this particular group, in terms of the block, they are referring to how they, support each other from a funeral point of view. So for them, I think, and this was one thing that they did quite well, is to identify, to say, we will only help you if it's someone that we know, someone who lives in our block. And they've limited that to people in their block, which is a great thing, because we've seen Stokvels where, people say, I'm going to cover, we live in this block, but every family, every household is entitled to maybe list 12 beneficiaries. And those 12 beneficiaries might not necessarily live in that block. So that opens up a whole can of worms where someone might say a relative of mine in a different province has passed away, and there's no way of verifying if indeed it is a relative. And so you find members abusing that system. So for them, in terms of the benefit that they give, the block does make sense. But it's not restrictive for the business element of what they're wanting to do. And by that I mean that the business element is then free to explore business opportunities in other areas, in surrounding areas. So they shouldn't limit their business opportunities to their block, as it were, because it will get saturated quite quickly. But they have to expand that. So for them, it's, expanding their business opportunities beyond their particular place in Mokopong and looking at other areas in Mokopong that they can service with the business that they want to enter into.
Thabiso, in this season, you really have touched on the power behind partnerships. And looking at the nature of this burial society, how else can they, look for other opportunities of growth when it comes to partnerships, like possibly partnering up with local event planners, for instance?
Yeah, I think the first thing that they have to do is to organize their administration. And by that I mean, you've got groups that say we want to start a business. So there are other things that you have to think about when you're starting a business as a group. So for instance, you look at how do we register our assets. So you find that a lot of groups, the only document that they have binding them is this thing that's called the constitution. And that's the only thing they'd need to open a bank account, for instance. So the bank would say to open up a Stokvel account, you need a constitution and give us 3 people who'd then be signatories to that account and so on. But the minute you start saying our Stokvel is a business, you need more documentation and admin becomes a bit more involved. In the sense that now that you are acquiring assets, who do those assets belong to? So now you start talking about what I think is referred to as a juristic person now. Now, because it's no longer individual people, but you're looking at a Stokvel as a legal entity that can own assets. And what you then do, it means you then have to register it as a company. And even registering it as a company, you've got different types of companies. Do you register it as CC, as going concern? So that's the admin that they have to look at. And then once they've decided on having that company, all the assets that they then acquire belong to the company. So even the bank account that they might have then belongs to the company. So you no longer have a situation where it's a Stokvel account and it's made up of different members. It's a company that then has different shareholders, and each member of a Stokvel is a shareholder. We always say to Stokvels, especially those that are in business, to always think of themselves as businesses, as companies, because that then makes it easier for them to understand their own operations. So once you've registered as a company, the question of where do you register your assets becomes something that's easy. The assets belong to the company and so on. So that would be the first step that they'd have to do to make sure that, but they shouldn't register the company before the business becomes operational. Because one of the things that we've seen with Stokvels, they have an ambition to start a company, to buy assets. But before they even start on that, they then get to a bank representative who then says the first thing you must do is open an account. And then they open an account and then there are delays with the business kicking off. And then they're paying bank fees for a business account that does not yet even exist. And so now they're losing money because the bank charges from the business account are going off every month, even though they don't have a business. So now these are ways that Stokvels are losing money out there.
We'll just hold it right there. There will be more valuable insights coming after this short break.